Hello, welcome to the self-learning platform by Dr. Sushma Singh. Today we start Unit 5, Moderates and Extremists, Dadabhai Naoroji, M.G. Ranade, and B.G. Tilak. Today let us discuss the 1907 Surat split. From 1905 to 1907, the struggle between various trends within the nationalist articulation of freedom struggle was fought out also at the annual session of the Congress, culminating in the Surat split of December 1907. The flashpoint was the 1905 Bengal partition that appeared to have enabled the extremists to provide a sharp critique of the moderate strategies that miserably failed. The moderate method of constitutional agitation, articulated in three P's petition, prayer, and protest, remained largely an academic exercise that seemed to have exhausted potentials with the consolidation of various groups championing direct action against the British. Condemning the Bengal partition and the repressive measures, Gokhale, in his 1905 Banaras presidential address, referred to economic boycott in a very lukewarm manner to avoid further repression by the government. The 1906 Congress Calcutta fulfilled the extremist goal partly in the sense that the Congress President Dadabhai Naoroji officially endorsed the resolutions on boycott, Swadeshi, national education, and self-government. The extremists' effort to extend the boycott resolution to cover provinces other than Bengal as well was defeated along with the resolution on boycott of honorary offices and of foreign goods. Enthusiastic over the victory of the Liberal Party in England, the moderate leadership was hopeful of a series of reform measures, including the annulment of the Bengal partition. The appointment of John Morley as the Secretary of State in early 1907 was hailed for his liberal views and was expected to inaugurate a new phase of British colonialism in contrast with the bitter legacy of the Curzon era. Despite changes in the British political climate, the friction between the moderates and extremists had shown no abatement, and they were preparing themselves for a head on collision in the 1907 Surat Congress, presided over by Ras Bihari Ghosh, who was vehemently opposed by Tilak and his colleagues from Maharashtra and Bengal. This was perhaps the only annual meeting of the Congress that was dissolved without deliberations. On the surface, one may find that the Surat Congress ended in a fiasco because it failed to amicably settle the extremist moderate dichotomy. In other words, what came out of this failed meeting of Congress was largely attributed to the irreconcilable contradiction between the extremists and moderates over the anti-imperial political agenda. There is, however, another dimension if one goes below the surface. The antagonism that split the Congress in Surat was the product of a first struggle between the Tilakatis of Pune and moderates of Bombay led by Firoz Shah Mehta. In fact, the Bengal extremists, including Aurobindo, wanted to avoid the split within the Congress so as not to weaken the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. This was expressed clearly at the Bengal Provincial Conference at Patna, presided over by Rabindranath Tagore, in which a resolution for an immediate session of Congress was accepted unanimously. Even Tilak's efforts did not yield results. The Bombay moderates remained adamant, and at its 1908 Allahabad Convention, the split was formalized by debarring those opposed to the strictly constitutional methods from participating in the Congress meetings and deliberations. The most obvious victim of this division was the nationalist movement itself, that appeared to have taken a back seat during internecine feud among the moderates and extremists. Interestingly, it would be difficult, if not possible, to demarcate the extremists and moderates in terms of their class background. Supporting largely the Hindu vested interest, both of them, though separated ideologically, were a product of an era when the nationalist politics was primarily confined to the urban areas. While the extremists, by encouraging individual heroism and revolutionary terrorism, inaugurated a new phase in nationalist agitation. Tilak's 1896-97 no tax campaign for the famine-stricken peasants in Maharashtra was a concrete step in expanding the constituency of nationalist politics by addressing the issues that hitherto remained neglected in the Congress agenda. Now let us have evaluation on extremists and the moderates. Of the different phases of Indian nationalism, the moderates and extremist phases represented the voice of an incipient nationalist movement that was neither properly crystallized nor had a support base among the masses. Based on their faith in British liberalism, moderates were preferably justified in pursuing the policy of reconciliation. In 1909, Minto Morley reforms was probably the upper limit of what the moderates could have gained under the circumstances. Even the revocation of Bengal partition was largely attributed to the reform zeal of the Liberal government in Britain. So, moderate efforts did not, at least on paper, go waste. What was, however, most remarkable was the fact that moderate campaign let loose a process of which extremist was also offshoot, whereby new ideas were set in motion. The nationalist zeal which so far was articulated in the annual session of the Congress in a strictly constitutional and peaceful way, was translated into a variety of actions, including boycott, Swadeshi, and strike. This resulted in an immediate expansion of the constituencies of nationalist politics that, under the moderates, represented largely the upper crust of Indian society. Despite sharing more or less the common social background with the moderates, the extremists, however, addressed the issues of the peasantry and workers, of course, in their terms, to underline the ideological differences with the formers. What lay at the most of the acrimonious exchange between the moderates and extremist leaders during the short lived 1907 Surat Congress was perhaps the reconcilable differences between the two. Articulating the ideological themes in probably the most sordid manner, both these groups seem to have allowed them to be swayed by considerations other than anti imperialism. That is why Rabindranath Tagore lamented that by determining to capture the Congress by hook and crook, the moderates and extremists failed to conceptualize, let alone realize, the basic nationalist goal of serving the people, and thereby made a mockery of themselves and also what they stood for. Despite Tagore's own efforts to bring these two forces together in the aftermath of the Surat fiasco, the adoption of resolution in the 1908 Allahabad Convention by moderates for permanently disqualifying the extremist section of Congress underlined the declining importance of nationalism as a repentant ideology vis-a-vis the British imperialism. Also, the extremist alternative was not qualitatively different, although the extremists were more militant and unique critique of British rule was articulated in stronger terms. They neither created a viable organization to lead the anti British movement nor could they define the movement in a way that differed from that of the moderates. Now let us have summary of the unit. It would be, however, historically inaccurate to dismiss the moderate and extremist efforts as futile simply because of the historical role they discharged in conceptualizing nationalist struggle in an organized manner. With a well defined political agenda, the early Congress leadership of both varieties identified the true nature of the principal political contradiction in a colony between the ruler and the ruled. There were various counts where the efforts were neither well tuned to the requirement nor well directed, involving the people regardless of religion, caste, and clan. In fact, the failure of the Congress in its formative years to address the social contradiction between the Hindus and Muslims led to the growth of the Muslim League in 1906 as the sole champion of the Muslims' socio political interest in British India. From now on, a significant section of Indian Muslims asserted a separate identity vis-à-vis Congress and the government. Given the class bias of the Hindus, the chasm between these two principal communities had grown bigger in course of time. If this was one side of the coin, the other side provided the foundation for a qualitatively different experiment in organized politics conducted by Gandhi through non-violence in the post-war period. Redefining the extremist method of Swadeshi boycott and strike in the changed environment when the imperial power became more brutal than before. Gandhi easily mobilized the masses in the anti-British campaign. The Congress in the Gandhian phase of nationalist struggle was completely transformed into a movement that had its tentacles even in remote villages. So Gandhi's success as a leader of a gigantic mass movement against perhaps the most organized imperial power was largely due to the organizational backing of the Congress that remained a mere platform for annually ventilating grievances against the British as well as setting scores against the fellow congressmen. Now we want to wind up this lecture and we have come to the end of the unit. Thank you so much for your attention.